Hello everyone. Today I'm tying a Freestyle Salmon Fly. This fly has a 2-part tag and body and a total of 10 jungle cock feathers throughout the fly. The hook is a Gaelic Supreme blind eye size 4/0. The thread to secure the silkworm gut to the hook is the Semperfli Nano Silk 24/0 white. Start the thread at the tip of the hook and trim the tag. Wrap a base along the tapered section and bring it back to the start. Next, prepare a small section of silkworm gut by bending it around a tapered bodkin to get the shape of the eye. Secure the gut eye from underneath the hook with edge-to-edge wraps along the threaded area. Make any adjustments to center the eye. Build up the thread, whip finish, trim, and add thin head cement over the wrap. Once dry, trim the ends on a taper with a razor blade so the ends are flush with the rest of the hook. The thread for the next part of the fly is the Uni-Nylon 70 denier white. Start the thread and trim the tag. The tinsel for the first part of the tag is the Lagerton fine oval gold tinsel. Take a piece of the oval tinsel and remove a section of tinsel down to the core. Secure the tinsel by the core and set it so the tinsel portion is even with the barb. Wrap with smooth wraps to that point. Flatten the thread and wrap a base for the tinsel and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the tinsel edge to edge for 5 turns. Strip the tinsel to the core again, unwind the thread and secure by the core with smooth wraps to the point and trim the excess. Wrap the thread to the start with smooth flat wraps. Next, add the extra fine copper tinsel starting at the end of the gut from underneath the hook for the rib on the first part of the tag. Add the light blue silk floss beside the copper tinsel. Grasp both strands firmly and secure with smooth flat wraps to the base of the tag. Wrap a smooth base from the end of the tag to the halfway point between the barb and the hook point. Spiral the thread out of the way and burnish the area. Wrap the light blue silk floss along the base with the smooth overlapped wraps. Unwind the thread to the floss and secure from underneath the hook with smooth wraps, even with the point, and trim the excess. Wrap the thread back to the end of the silk floss with smooth wraps and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the fine copper tinsel as a rib for 2 wraps, evenly spaced and angled. Unwind the thread and secure along the base of the tag. Trim the excess even with the point and wrap the thread back to the start. Next, I'm adding the Lagerton fine oval silver tinsel. Take a strand of the tinsel and prepare it the same way as the gold tinsel for the second part of the tag. Secure the tinsel by the core from underneath the hook and set it so the tinsel portion is even with the end of the silk floss. Wrap with smooth flat wraps along the base and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the tinsel edge to edge for 5 turns. Strip the tinsel to the core again. Unwind the thread and secure by the core with smooth wraps to the point and trim the excess. Wrap the thread back to the end of the silkworm gut. Next, add the fine blue tinsel from underneath the hook with a few wraps and add the red silk floss beside the tinsel. Grasp both strands firmly and secure with smooth wraps to the base of the silver tinsel. Wrap the thread forward along the base with smooth wraps. Spiral the thread out of the way and burnish the area. Wrap the red silk floss forward along the base. Secure, trim the excess even with the point and burnish the area. Wrap the fine blue tinsel as a rib for 2 wraps, evenly spaced and angled. Unwind the thread and secure along the base for the butt. Trim the excess and wrap the thread back to the start. Trim the excess tags and wrap the thread back to the base of the tag with the smooth flat wraps. Next, prepare the golden pheasant crest. Choose a feather that has the right arch that will match the topping. Measure, peel off the unwanted fibers and trim the tying point and flatten the stem. Secure the crest on top of the hook and center it in front of the tag. And wrap with smooth wraps back to the start. Whip, finish, and trim. I'm switching over to the Uni-Thread 17-aught tricot to secure the veils at the tail. Start the thread and trim the tag and wrap towards the base of the tail. For the first veil, I'm using Lady Amherst pheasant crest. Measure the crest. I want it about 2/3 of the length of the golden pheasant crest. Remove the excess fibers from the stem at that point and flatten the stem. Secure on top of the golden pheasant crest, centered, and build up the thread. For the second part of the veil, I'm using wood duck. Trim even sections from each side of the stem, left and right. Place them back to back so they're tent style. The length is about half the length of the Amherst crust. Secure with a soft loop and a cinch wrap. Prepare 2 jungle cock tips. Secure on each side of the wood duck. Have the tips even with the second black bar on the wood duck. Secure the tips one at a time by the tapered section of the lower stems on each side, left and right, with the tips even. Take a strand of ostrich herl, trim the end, strip away the fibers from the butt, secure the herl by the stem at the base of the completed section. Trim the excess stems on a taper, flush with the wraps, build up the base for the butt. Build up the thread over the trimmed butts and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the herl edge to edge along the base for 5 turns. Unwind the thread and secure the rest of the herl along the threaded area and trim the rest. Build up the thread, whip finish, and trim. Measure and mark the rest of the hook, starting from the tip of the Silkworm Gut Eye to the beginning of the ostrich herl butt. The first mark is the length of the head, the second mark is the length of the hackle collar, and the third mark is the middle of the 2-part body. Switch back to the Uni-Nylon 70 denier white for the next part of the fly. Start the thread and trim the tag. Add the fine silver oval tinsel already prepared. Secure from underneath the hook starting at the end of the Silkworm Gut Eye and set it so the tinsel is even with the herl. Add the golden silk floss beside the tinsel and secure with a few wraps. Add a small gold flat embossed tinsel beside the silk floss and secure with a few wraps. Finally, add the purple silk floss over the gold silk floss. This will be the body for the first half. Grasp all 4 strands firmly, each parallel to each other. Secure all 4 strands with smooth flat wraps to the base of the ostrich herl butt. Build up the thread and trim the excess tags. Build up the thread with smooth flat wraps along the body to get a consistent taper. Wrap the thread to the middle mark and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the silver oval tinsel over the threaded area to the middle mark for 3 wraps, evenly spaced and angled. Mark where the second rib falls and unwind the tinsel. Wrap the thread to the mark with smooth wraps. Next, prepare the dyed blue badger hackle. Flatten the stem and fold the hackle. Trim the tip for the tying point. The length of the tying point is the same as the mark of the second rib to the middle mark of the body. Secure from underneath the hook starting at the mark with smooth flat wraps. Build up the thread to the left of the middle mark on both sides of the hackle for a smooth taper and spiral the thread out of the way. Burnish the area so it's smooth. Wrap the purple silk floss forward on both sides of the hackle towards the middle mark. Unwind the thread and secure the floss along the threaded portion to the end of the silkworm gut and trim the excess. Wrap the thread back towards the middle and spiral the thread out of the way. Burnish the silk body so it's smooth. Bring the hackle forward and secure by the thread to keep it out of the way. Next, wrap the oval silver tinsel first along the purple silk body on a wide angle and evenly spaced. Remove the tinsel down to the core and secure by the core. Trim the excess and move the hackle out of the way. Wrap the gold silk floss tight to the silver oval tinsel. Secure and trim the excess. Wrap the flat gold embossed tinsel tight to the gold silk floss. Secure and trim the excess and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the folded dyed blue badger hackle along the silver oval tinsel. Once you get past the body, wrap the remaining hackle as a collar with tight edge-to-edge wraps. Secure by the stem and trim the excess. Weld up the thread and trim. Next, I'm switching over to the Simplify Nano Silk 24/0 white for the next part of the fly. Start the thread and trim the tag and wrap towards the middle of the front of the collar. Remove the hackle fibers down to the stem, the ones taken out on top of the hook. Prepare 2 large jungle cock feathers for the underwing. Place both feathers back to back and even. Measure. I want the tips even with the eye of the jungle cock feather at the veil. Remove the waste fibers from the stem at that point. Flatten both stems and place on top of the hook in front of the hackle. Secure with a few wraps and make any necessary adjustments to keep the both feathers centered. Next, I'm adding the prepared married wings to the middle section of the body. Place both wings together back to back with the tips even. Set it over the underwing with the tips even with the tip of the Amherst pheasant crest at the veil. Secure with a soft loop and a few cinch wraps. Check to make sure the wing is centered and whip finish. Adjust the arch of the wing so it's positioned with the Amherst pheasant crest. Prepare 2 jungle cock tips slightly larger than the ones at the veil. Remove the waist portion and flatten the stems on both feathers. Add the jungle cock tips on each side of the married wings. Secure the tips one at a time by the tapered section of the lower stems on each side of the wing. Trim the excess stems flush with the wraps using a scissors and razor. Build up the thread with smooth wraps over the trimmed butts. Next, prepare the Lady Amherst pheasant crest for the topping over the married wing. Flatten the stem and place it on top of the wing and centered. Secure with a soft loop and a cinch wrap. Make any adjustments and build up the thread. Take a strand of the dyed purple ostrich herl. Strip away the fibers from the butt. Secure the herl by the stem at the base of the completed section. Build up the base for the butt and spiral the thread out of the way. Wrap the herl edge to edge along the base for 5 turns. Unwind the thread and secure the rest of the herl along the threaded area and trim the excess. Next, prepare another fine silver oval tinsel. Secure the tinsel by the core from underneath the hook with a few wraps and line up the tinsel portion even with the butt. Add the fine flat silver tinsel beside the oval tinsel and secure with a few wraps. Add the small flat gold embossed tinsel beside the flat silver tinsel. Grasp all 3 strands firmly and secure with smooth wraps to the ostrich herl butt, keeping the strands parallel to each other. Trim the tags and build up the thread. Add the blue silk floss from underneath the hook and secure with smooth flat wraps to the butt. Build up the thread, whip finish, and trim the thread. Start the Uni-Nylon 70 denier white and trim the tag. Build up the thread with smooth flat wraps. Wrap the fine silver oval tinsel over the threaded area as a rib for 4 turns, evenly spaced and angled. Mark where the first rib starts and unwind the tinsel. Next, prepare another dyed blue badger hackle. Flatten the stem and fold the hackle. Secure the hackle by the tip starting at the mark and wrap with smooth flat wraps along the straight part of the threaded area. Trim the excess and build up the thread with smooth flat wraps. Burnish the threaded area for a smooth underbody. Wrap the blue silk floss over the threaded area with smooth flat wraps. Secure and trim the excess. Burnish the silk body for a smooth finish. Wrap the silver oval tinsel first along the silk body as a rib, with evenly spaced and angled wraps. Remove the tinsel to the core and secure by the core and trim the excess. Wrap the fine flat silver tinsel beside the oval tinsel, secure and trim the excess. Followed by the small flat gold embossed tinsel. Leave a small space between the two tinsels to show the blue silk floss. Secure and trim the excess. Wrap the dyed blue badger hackle tight to the silver oval tinsel. Wrap the remaining hackle as a collar once you get past the body. Secure by the stem and trim the excess. Prepare the third dyed blue badger hackle, slightly larger than the previous hackle. Flatten the stem and fold the hackle. Trim a small tying point and secure from underneath the hook tight to the collar. Wrap the hackle with tight edge-to-edge wraps as a collar. Secure by the stem, trim the excess. Build up the thread whip finish and trim the thread. Remove the hackle fibers down to the stem on the second part of the body that are on top of the hook. I switched over to the Semperfli Nano Silk 24/0 white. Next, prepare 2 large jungle cock feathers for the next underwing. Place both feathers back to back and measure. I want the tips even with the jungle cock feather on the first married wing. Remove the waste portion from the stems at that point and flatten the stems. Secure the feathers on top of the hook and centered. For the main wing, I'm using married strands of Florican bustard, dyed green, blue, and yellow turkey, Cory bustard, dyed orange turkey, and Argus pheasant quill. The 2 bustards and pheasant quills each have 4 strands. The dyed turkeys have 3. Set each section slightly longer than the previous section for a tapered tip. Place both wings together back to back and place the wing on top of the hook over the underwing, with the tips even with the tip of the golden pheasant crest. Secure on top of the hook with a soft loop and a cinch wrap, and make any necessary adjustments at this point, then add a few more cinch wraps. Adjust the wings so they sit properly by bending the wings in an arch. Next, prepare a fine Cree hackle, a size 28 for the side wing. The length is the same as the main wing. Flatten the stem and secure along the side of the wing. Repeat on the opposite side of the wing. And make any adjustments so both hackles are even. For the sides of the wing, I'm adding married strands of wood duck and gadwall. Secure one at a time with a soft loop and a cinch wrap. Have the tip even with the middle section of the underwing. Repeat on the opposite side. Line up the bars so they're both even. Secure with a soft loop and a cinch wrap. Trim the excess strands on a taper using a razor. Build up the thread over the trim butts. Next, prepare a coq de leon hackle. Fold the hackle and flatten the stem. Secure the hackle with firm wraps by the tip from underneath the hook tight to the collar. Trim the ends flush with the wraps. Build up the thread over the trimmed ends and whip finish. Wrap the hackle with tight edge-to-edge wraps going forward for the collar. Secure by the stem and trim the excess. Build up the thread and whip finish. Remove the hackle fibers on top of the collar down to the stem so it's even with the body hackle. Next, prepare 2 jungle cock feathers for the cheeks. Have the tips even with the beginning of the first bar on the wood duck and remove the waste fibers at that point. Flatten the stem and secure with a single soft loop and tighten. Repeat on the opposite side of the wing and make any adjustments so both sides are even. For the hood, I'm adding married strands of red and black goose shoulder, 2 segments, and Argus pheasant. Trim the excess stems before adding the hood. Place both wings together back to back with the tips even and bend the wings so there's a space in between. Place the wings on top of the main wing so it straddles it evenly and secure with a soft loop and a cinch wrap. Once secured, make any necessary adjustments. Add the Indian crow or substitute on each side of the wing, already prepared. The length is half the length of the jungle cock feather. Trim the excess fibers on a sharp taper for the head. Next, add the prepared golden pheasant crust. Flatten and bend the stem. Set it on top of the wing and centered, and secure with a soft loop and a cinch wrap. Prepare 2 blue macaw strands for the horns. Take a single strand from each side of the stem, left and right. Even out the tips and trim the butts so they're both even. Secure on each side of the wing, left and right. Build up the thread into a neat taper, whip finish, and trim the head. Finish the head using black thread. Build up the thread to cover the white. Whip finish, trim, and add thin head cement. Finally, add the 5-minute epoxy evenly around the head. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe and hit the like button to see more traditional and freestyle salmon flies.